Good morning, Ed Kashi. Welcome on VH Berries.
Good morning. Hello. How are you?
I'm great. How about you?
Hanging in there, waiting in anticipation for, whether my country's democracy will survive in the next week, but I have faith.
You are at the forefront of the experimentation with visual language and also by using a standing desk.
That's right. That's right. So I am shifting around. But you know what they say, sitting is the new cancer.
It's an interesting analogy because when you're upright, you're free to move very quickly, a bit like your work as a photojournalist.
That's a good one. That's right. But I mean, let's face it, we are still animals and we were not made to sit in chairs. So, I think that sitting a lot is probably the source of many health problems that people have.
And you just mentioned the future of democracy, and I just realized a couple hours earlier that the Twitter account of Donald Trump was suspended.
Yes, which was, I would say, 4 years or 5 years overdue. But thankfully, Twitter and Facebook and even now YouTube, which is owned by Google, have, at least silenced him for the time being, maybe forever. And, I know that it brushes up against, in the United States, our First Amendment rights for free speech. But it's so clear that he and many others violate even the simple terms of agreement with these social media organizations, let alone what the Constitution says in the First Amendment, that you're free to say whatever you want, but you cannot incite violence.
Sure. And I would like to focus on the present, your current project and state of mind. And there is no separation between your life and your work, which means that you often work with your wife, Jolie Winocourt.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We don't work enough. I mean, we had to pass through 20 years of child rearing, which was obviously a very beautiful and rich thing. And now we are blessed with two great young humans who are independent. But we've started now to work together again after having worked quite a lot over our lives, over our careers. We just started a new project that was featured in Time magazine a couple of weeks ago about political discourse in the United States.
And how did you meet each other?
Well, like so much in my life, everything seems to lead back to photography. And in 1992, we met at a book publishing seminar in San Francisco. And that's it. From there, everything took off. So, we were married and had a child within a few years of that beautiful date, and we're almost 30 years into our relationship. As colleagues, working together, supporting each other, and of course also creating work independently of each other, and then raising two kids. So.
And together, you founded in 2002 a non-profit company named Talking Eyes Media. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so so Talking Eyes Media evolved out of our big 8-year project called Aging in America, where we had spent that time looking at this one very critical sort of social issue that was in the United States, and frankly, that's confronting most of the industrialized world. And after that experience, where we had received a lot of grants, foundation grants, and other creative grants, we realized that if we could have our own nonprofit, we would, first of all, be able to use all the monies we received in grants to create our work, as opposed to paying taxes and paying what is called a fiscal agent. And so, anyway, not to get too granular, basically on a sort of spiritual and practical level, we felt that if we started our own nonprofit, then we could not only use it to raise money for our projects, but it would also allow us a little more independence from media industry, if you like. Because one thing we've learned over the years, both collectively, working together as well as individually, certainly that's the hallmark of my career as a photojournalist, is that when you come up with your own ideas, when you propose your own ideas, that's where not only the greatest work comes from, but also, basically, as they say, if you build it, they will come. And so one thing I counsel photographers who I mentor and teach is that if you're waiting for that phone call or email to come in from an editor, it might happen, but that's not where the great work will come from. And that's also not where you'll find your own voice and your own sense of what you care about. That all of those great things come from you coming up with your own ideas and then executing on them.
I like this quote. Steve Jobs used to say it, to create the product that the people wouldn't expect. And if I understood correctly, this special non-profit company is focusing on creating visual media that catalyzes a positive social change. And together with a strong team, you put films to work at a grassroots level.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that, because another critical element that for Julie and I is so important is that our work can contribute to some kind of change, positive change, obviously, and so for the last 6 years, we've been focused a lot on the issue of immigration in the United States through our ongoing project called Newest Americans, where through Rutgers University in Newark, New Jersey, we've used sort of that campus and that platform to tell stories in many different mediums or media to tell stories about immigration. But Talking Eyes Media, its foundational kind of element or ethos, if you like, is really about how do we use, whether it's photography, filmmaking, writing, books, exhibitions, films, whatever it may be, performance art, whatever it may be, to create work that is compelling about issues that we care about, that will also advance the dialogue in the public sphere, change people's minds, and get people to engage with those issues.
And then the camera slowly become your third eyes. It's the talking eyes.
That's right. Actually, I have to admit that name came to me while I was on a massage table in San Francisco. and as I was getting a massage, I was talking with then our massage therapist, Marina, who we had gone to for more than a decade. So she was a dear friend. And we were saying, I was saying to her, yeah, Julie and I are starting a nonprofit and we haven't figured out a name. And so Marina and I were troubleshooting or not troubleshooting, but sort of riffing. And we came up with that name. So it does make for a very long email address, though. Not so good.
By dint of publishing works, the short films wins award and you make exhibits and publish books.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, we've not isolated ourselves to only doing still photography and focused on print media. And of course, that would be absurd given how the media landscape has changed so dramatically since 2002. So, now we really look, there was a term that was very, very in vogue called transmedia a few years ago. And it's that idea of, creating media materials that can work across platforms, and especially now with social media having so much importance, and then just the digital platforms of heretofore editorial outlets. So for instance, you might have work published in National Geographic in the print edition, but if you have an image on their Instagram account, you reach millions of more people. So the idea or the philosophy behind our approach is to create what we call multi-platform storytelling. So we might use still images and video and text to then create materials that can work in print, that can work on the digital platforms of editorial outlets like Time Magazine or the New York Times or the New Yorker, so forth. And then also create films that can work on the web and when possible, although it's very difficult, in broadcast. Broadcast is probably the toughest kind of media channel to succeed in.
Exactly. You just mentioned, for example, Instagram, which is a platform that can share and diffuse pictures massively. And for example, you have a massive Instagram account with like 300,000 followers.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre to think how, to like look at how things have changed in this profession. I started in 1980, 1981, so it's been, a 40-year journey now. And, who would have ever thought things would evolve to what they are today? And I'm very much of a forward-thinking and forward-looking person. So, I welcome these changes, even though they've been incredibly disruptive, financially. In many ways, it's been very disruptive. But what it has allowed us to do now is to, first of all, be way more creative and in different media, as I just said, but also to reach so many more people globally. And because of the reach of the internet and now social media, we're not like, our work is not just ghettoized ghettoized is the wrong term. Our work is not just sort of like only seen by people in wealthy nations, that virtually anybody anywhere who has an internet connection or a smartphone can look at the work that not only we create, but our colleagues as well. And so, for all the sort of downsides of social media and the internet and, the very sort of tragic siloing of people's information and now belief or in what is factual and, what is real, at least we can also reach people in a way that we never could. And that's, to me, a very exciting and encouraging development. And we try to take advantage of that.
So, for example, at Kashi, when you did your work, Paradox Nation in Pakistan, which is one of the most extraordinary country for you, you mean that you are touching people in Pakistan on your, for example, social media?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if they're paying attention, but, I'll put it as an analogy, or not an analogy, an example. In 1998, I did my first story for National Geographic in Pakistan, about Pakistan, and whenever it was published in 1999. So unless you had a subscription to National Geographic magazine, or unless you had some way of seeing it, physically, you would never know that story happened if you lived in Pakistan. Whereas, I think it was in 2009, I did my last story for Nat Geo in Pakistan about the Punjab province. By that time, people didn't need to subscribe. They didn't need to have the financial means, to the average Pakistani, which would be quite expensive for them, unless you were in the upper middle class or beyond. You didn't need a subscription anymore. All you needed was an internet connection. And so that, to me, is such an exciting development. And I want to say, Victor, that it's not just exciting for me as the creator of this work, but it's also exciting, or it's also what it has done is it has created a greater responsibility on our shoulders as journalists, as media creators, because now we can be held accountable for what we say and what we show in a way that was never possible when we were only working in print media. And that's a very positive development.
Did you book a new flight to Pakistan?
No, no. I mean, international travel, as I'm sure you're aware of, is not so easy during the pandemic. It's definitely tricky. So I have no plans to go to Pakistan right now, but certainly it would be amazing to return there, because it truly is one of the most extraordinary places I've ever been. For all its problems and all the issues there, it is a pretty magical place.
And I mentioned Pakistan because you have this capability of cumulating multiple projects and different vision at the same time. For example, when you were working on your project in Pakistan, Paradox Nation from 1994 to 2009, you were also working on the years ahead.
Yeah, so it's rare that I'm only working on one project. I mean, that would be a dream, quite frankly, but I don't think it's really possible for many reasons. But, in general, I'm always, juggling assignment work, commissions, and then, developing my own personal projects. And so, and now also with mentoring and teaching and lecturing, it becomes a pretty robust practice here that I'm trying to maintain. But I'll tell you, at the heart of my work and my being is having a personal project that I'm engaged with. And yeah.
That's a fact. You are both 1 year apart. You are the Tom Hanks of photojournalism.
Listen to you. You're too kind.
Because Tom Hanks is best known for Forrest Gump, and you, Ed Kashi, are best known for Aging in America.
There you go. All right, that's it. And I've aged through the whole thing, So...
Because in this very particular work called Aging in America, so America is your home, and in 29 years, the meaning of this word has shifted for you.
The meaning of what word?
The word home.
Ah, yes. Well, when you live what one would call a peripatetic life, a life of being on the road, the majority of the time, then home is a strange thing. I've something that I've struggled with, and I continue to struggle with, because you're constantly having to sort of bifurcate your mentality, your heart, and you're on the one hand juggling being home and being a good partner to your mate and to your family, but then you're also I'm always preparing to be gone. And so it's a very unusual existence, really. But one of the very interesting developments or realizations because of the pandemic, where now I've been forced to be home more than I have ever been in probably 30 years, like literally. It's made me appreciate being home. And, I say to Julie, I feel spoiled because I'm not used to, being home for dinner most nights and being able to chill out and not having to wake up super early to go and go out into battle, to do the work. So even though I am working and traveling a bit, it's very different right now. And so for me, home during the pandemic has meaning in a way I've never felt before, really, in my adult life.
I can feel this because after being everywhere on the planet, your last work called Rising to the Call was made not very far from your home in New Jersey.
That's right. This past March, when the pandemic really hit in America and we had to shut down, and all of a sudden, after decades of being on the road most of the time, I realized I couldn't travel, or it would be very unsafe to travel. I decided to look what I would call to do hyper-local storytelling. And it's something that I've thought about for years, and I've done stories on my family in the past and in my home even, but it's not something that I normally tried to do or thought about. And so the pandemic really brought home the value of hyper-local storytelling, because we should always remember that all around us there are great stories to be told. There's great characters and issues that need to be reported on or photographed. And so I decided to look at, for a change, a positive thing, which was how individuals and organizations in my home state of New Jersey were dealing with the pandemic. And again, this was an idea that I came up with. I spent about 2 months going out most days, photographing things, doing research, and accumulating a body of work. And then I decided to call it Rising to the Call, with this idea of, while people were panicking and suffering and going through something that they had never anticipated or experienced before, which was this quarantine pandemic, there were people and there were organizations that were rising to the moment, that were volunteering, that were putting themselves, even their own selves, at risk, or shifting their business models to do things to help other people. And I can't emphasize that enough, especially in this period that we're thankfully coming out of under the Trump administration, where, so there was so much disarray with government and this idea that we were all in it, we're in it alone and we couldn't rely on each other, that I wanted to highlight how there's so many great people and great organizations and businesses and government institutions that were really taking this moment to do the right thing and to help one another.
And as you said, Ed Kashi, this amazing story, you are giving them a voice because 2021 rhymes for you also with the Enigma Room.
Yeah, the Enigma Room. Well, that piece, which is an experimental immersive video, something I've never done before, that actually premiered in 2019 at Photoville in Brooklyn, in New York. And then last year it appeared at the Breda Festival in Holland. And it looks like there's a couple of venues, if all goes smoothly this year, that it will appear in. But this is an active project that my studio mates, the people that I'm working with, we're constantly developing it into new iterations, and it's really cool to sort of experiment with audio and with all the accumulated visual material that I have. Well, all the work I've accumulated over the last 40 years. So, this is an example of where, as an artist, I guess, or creative, as a creative soul, I'm always looking to do new things and try new things. And at the heart of the Enigma project is the idea of coding, computer coding, that, really since Instagram and Hipstamatic came about, photography is coding. That even if you create images in film, you could use a pinhole camera. Ultimately, it will be digitized to be able to share with the world. And so once you digitize images, you're dealing with computer coding. But that also means it invites a tremendous amount of manipulation. And I don't mean that in a negative sense in this case. Obviously, when we manipulate images that are meant to be factual or reality-based, that's hugely problematic. But in this case, as long as you're transparent, which I am with this project, it's really about playing with computer coding and kind of trying to trick the viewer or bring them to a place they've not been before.
Yes, exactly. You mean that you are using the leverage of coding as a new mode of creating and consuming photography. And you also succeed to implement the Enigma Room in South Korea in March of 2021.
That's right. Thank you. I know. I'm very excited about that. I wish I could go. I have such an interest in South Korea now. It's a place that was always sort of in the background in the American mind. And I feel like in the last handful of years, South Korea has really emerged as not only an economic powerhouse, but also a cultural powerhouse. And so I'm very excited to have my work in South Korea. I just wish I could go one day.
Thank you, Ed Kashi.
Thank you so much, Victor.